on this lovely hot day. I won't keep you long. Lots of references to shepherds in the readings today, and then one in the middle that seems to have completely unconnected, but I will make a sort of connection. And I'm going to focus on the shepherds and the sheep. One book I looked at said there's 400 references to sheep in the Bible, another said 500. Whatever's true, it's a lot. And it's clearly a reference, an analogy that the people that were being addressed at that time would have understood. A nomadic society looking after sheep. In Jeremiah, we're told that they were bad shepherds and they needed to make a new start. And the shepherds are a metaphor for kings in this case, not specific named kings, just kings in general that were not being good leaders. And we hear that a new leader from the house of David, which we now recognise as Christ, will be coming. But for them, it's just the idea of a new start. And then we didn't hear all of it, but the psalm that's probably the best known psalm in the world. Psalm 23 with the beautiful imagery of shepherds and peace. And then Mark's Gospel, which takes up... Last week we had the beheading of John the Baptist, which seemed completely out of place, but was there important to be looking back and looking forward. But now we carry on as though that story hadn't happened from what happened the week before, with Jesus and his disciples needing a rest. Don't we know that feeling, but probably nowhere near as much as Jesus felt it. But in his compassion, and compassion means much more than just being kind, it's a real deep feeling from the guts of care and love and empathy. In his compassion, he went out amongst the people and let them come to him. But back to the analogy of sheep and shepherds, and particularly shepherds, and the leadership of shepherds. Shepherds were a vital part of the community. Shepherd boys would grow up to be shepherds, and they were recognised. But sheep were always thought to be silly, or we like sheep. But shepherds is an analogy of leadership. But I want to talk a bit more generally about leadership and where good leaders come from. Because it's easy to think of bad leaders, leaders that are imposed from above. And good leaders come from a society which makes them need to be surrounded with care and love, and not allowed to dictate. So, as I say, a good society produces good leadership, and it's our shared responsibility to recognise leadership qualities in others, to allow them to develop, to know that they're supported, and not let too much dictatorship, any dictatorship, come in. Jesus, I suppose, was the ultimate in good leadership, and he is frequently called the Good Shepherd. But we need to think of other styles of leadership that might be appropriate in the context. As I said, the context of talking about shepherds made sense to the people that were being addressed, both by Jeremiah and in the Gospel. But we need to think about metaphors and analogies that make sense to us here now. Everything has to be in the context of where we're set. Looking back and learning, being where we are now, and looking ahead. And good leaders recognise that the little seeds that are sown, we might not see the results, we're very unlikely to see the results, but not be worried about personal satisfaction and, oh, aren't you wonderful, but recognise that it's the beginnings of something. Seeds might be being sown as we look ahead to the future. And Ephesians seems to be more about buildings, building the church, whereas the other readings are very much not about buildings, very much being out in the countryside, out amongst the people. And we talk a lot about churches not being the building, but being the people, and building up. But we do need to remember that we need to meet and gather somewhere, and we have buildings, and we are the cornerstone, that Christ is the cornerstone, and we are part of those buildings in those communities. But I do want to think more about the shepherds and the sheep, because those are really what the readings have been about, and what we need to consider as we look forward, to think of bad rulers, bad leaders, and to avoid falling into the traps, to allow bad rulers and leaders to grow up in our communities, to think of Jesus, the good leader, and to find time to draw away quietly with him, to gain strength from him, to not be so caught up in the busyness, whether we are leaders or we are sheep. I'm not saying sheep as stupid sheep, but sheep as being part of the flock, a flock in which we all have a part to play. And maybe there are leaders in the flock. Maybe you yourself have the potential to be leaders, and we all need to bring that out. But always remembering that it's no good if everybody's a leader. There has to be somebody to join in. So may we find time to get close to Jesus, our Good Shepherd, to draw close to him, to get strength just from touching the hem of his flock. Amen.